Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So, my name is Griffin, and this talk is called Art, Ecology and Community, but the day that's in it, of a Sunday and whatnot, you can change the title of it and be like, Art, Ecology and Community, a very relaxed, informal conversation with Kerry, Griffin, Zoe Rush, Lisa Fitzsimons and Barry O'Donoghue. But the red thread that's kind of tying us all together in this talk is the Dinnseanchas project. So you've all probably heard about the Dinnseanchas project on various different levels this weekend. But so I'm an artist on the Dinnseanchas project. Myself, project Models were based in Lyreacrompane. And so Zoe Rush is also an artist on the Dinnseanchas project, and she's based in Kerry. But Zoe's also a project designer for the Ardnaculla with the Dingle Hub. So there's like Zoe's operating in a few different spaces as an artist, but also a community development space. Then we have Lisa Fitzsimons, who's a strategy and sustainability in the Irish Museum of Modern Art. And Dinnseanchas and Humphrey has been accepted to present in the Earth Rising up in IMMA in September. So that's the right thread there. And then we have Griffin, who is a professional working in nature conservation, focusing on policy research, landowner community engagement, and Barry also is, well, you're not born and bred in Lyreacrompane, but you're a classic as a Lyreacrompane.
Yeah, that's it, yeah, exactly, yeah.
But so Barry's like running two projects in Lyreacrompane, among others, the Kerry Conservation Project and the Harrier Conservation Project. And through the Dinnseanchas work and stuff, Barry's been really kind of close advisor and running sounding board for us in Lyre, and very welcoming. And we also worked really closely with his father Tim, who's an absolute legend. But I think just going back to the where the guys haven't got a chance to actually speak.
That's true.
It's this tight, like real bit of hype there. But the kind of theme around Earth Rising is Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, making kin in the Tulip. And it's really fitting. And we've used it an awful lot as a guiding light maybe in our Dinnseanchas work, but I also think, you know, the locations we've been in, and then actually the work that everybody does in their respective professional spaces, I think that everyone's staying with the trouble in some form or another. They're turning up, they're kind of facing the music. You know, some days are really difficult, others there's like little shining lights of hope weekend here in Humphrey. But I think it's a really interesting kind of theme to be operating on, because I think it's actually fact as well, and like what's occurring. But in the sense of then like with that notion of staying out the trouble and the challenges we're going to be facing, the challenges ahead, and from your own kind of perspectives, professionally as well as personally, what are the kind of, for you guys, the benefits of artistic and kind of creative practices in creating space for people to collectively stay with the trouble, but and kind of bridge gaps, I guess. That's the only question. Take it whatever way you wish.
Sorry. So yeah, I guess I was kind of thinking of this. I did an art residency back in November, and it was all to do with unleash to unlearn, or unlearn to unleash. I guess a lot of it is creativity brings us into a space where often, you know, when you're a kid, you can be told you're not creative, but that person's amazing at it. So it almost touches on some of the traumas that we have. And I think it is also the place like we innately create to kind of process and work through things. So I think it opens it up so that you can enter into more difficult relationships with people where you see their shadow sides, and then you have to meet that and stay with it and be in relationship. But it also gives this healing kind of process. So if I'm stuck on something, I'll often go out walking and then drawing, and then this is a way to kind of calm down and wake up thoughts. Enter. So I kind of guess that is part of it, is building up those relationships. And with the farmers, definitely art was like the excuse to start talking to people in each place. So you go, oh yeah, I'm working on this project, I don't really know what it is. And then you start the conversation, you keep going and go deeper, and yeah, it was kind of the excuse to build trust.
Yeah, just a little artistic license and the whole
Yeah.
the doors and the doors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of tea on the table. Like, at least from your perspective as well as a cultural institution, like the value of
So I suppose IMMA is a museum of modern art, and as a modern art museum, we feel we have a responsibility to reflect the issues of our time, and I guess there is no more issue more pressing than the earth crisis. And I think art is a really powerful way to connect with people. I think it can give like a visual voice to science in a way that connects emotionally with people. So it's all well and good to read a scientific paper, and those science facts and data is hugely important. But if you can try and represent that in a creative way, whether it's through film, through storytelling, through visual art, dance, theatre, whichever way you want to express, I think you have a better chance of tugging on the heartstrings of people and connecting emotionally. And I think that's then what brings people in and makes them open to looking at things in a different way. I also think, the earth crisis is a polycrisis, as we all know, and I think part of that it's a crisis of the imagination. I think we can't keep continuing existing the way we have been. We need to start imagining new ways of existing and living together in this world. And I think we all have the power to be creative. We all have that potential to be imaginative. But through art and storytelling and play, we kind of exercise those imagination muscles and to get the juices flowing, and we're more likely to then start to think of alternative ways of being, which I find quite exciting and hopeful actually.
Barry, from your perspective.
Yeah, I just totally concur with what's been said. Yeah, particularly with the last point there with Lisa. Like, I work with the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and we're part of the government, civil servant. We're dealing with the data, dealing with the bureaucratic side of things, the regulations, etc. The science, the research, but that's not what's going to save species as part of it. But it's the people, the communities, the landowners. They're the ones who are the most important people. They're the ones who have the wherewithal, the ability to impact for positive or for negative. And art can be used as part of that to actually move people, It's not reading a report, as you say, that's going to move anybody. The old adage of picture speaks 1,000 words, you see a photograph of a curlew, for example, or a curlew or chick, and like the video that you did there on Lyreacrompane, Heather, is absolutely stunning. Like, Jesus, those people crying, like watching that, and they're saying, fucking lads, we need to do something about this, it's like, it moves people. The piece of art that you did, Heather, and yourself and Paddy, is so moving. It actually moves you to action, and I think that's really, there's a critical part for art to play in that regard. It can't be all just about facts and figures and statistics, so that for me, there's a major part to play. And just one example, I suppose, would be with the Kerry work that we did. We got these willow structures made by lovely artists up in Donegal, Brendan and Farron, and they're big giant structures, and we put them into the 9 areas that we were operating across Ireland, and so putting fairly prominent locations. And it's a symbol, this is one of the most important parts of the country, for this rare bird, this beautiful bird, and it just makes people think. It makes the old people think, and they think back to what was there, and they can reminisce and tell their stories about what they remember growing up, and those sounds that it would bring back, and the memories it would bring back. And then for the new generation, the younger generation, the young children, school children, etc., to know that they're part of the world is something to be celebrated. It's a really important place. So just symbology there as well. Yeah.
It has really.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I think from the community development point of view as well, it's once you are part of that, or you've been invited in, or you've shared a story, and that's elevated through what we're people really care, and then they're emotionally moved by it, then that kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, this is really important, or it really galvanizes the support for them to change behind it.
Yeah.
I agree. It's kind of like the level of visibility added to the work that's already going on happening, and even like with the Kerry sculptures. There's a lot of people who've probably never even seen a Kerry. And it's a sculpture, it's not the real deal, but it's maybe the closest some people will get to seeing it.
Yeah.
But and even on your Audio walk as well, there's so much visibility around those farmers and what they're doing day to day and what they're up against in the day to day, systemically and everything as well. So I think it just those kind of creative practices, and hopefully we're all bringing to IMMA as well, and rising. It's like it goes beyond awareness. We've gone beyond awareness. We have to be gone beyond awareness at this stage. It's like that's the next level. But yeah, and I think like your point on imagination as well. Absolutely, it's kind of like we need to start being allowed to imagine again as well, because there's a bit of that as well. There's a bit of the hospicing modernity scenario of like just there's a bit of blocker on our imagination or something, or it's not good to imagine anymore, or things like that. So we're not giving you a walk again. It's the same as imagining deep time, and so imagining being on purpose with these people is really impressive. But in this, I think then like jumping on from that then is like I think the role of arts and stuff is shifting as well. And is there something like obviously Dinnseanchas project and the one you're doing in Dingle is kind of trying to be, it's more like about embedding like arts and arts practices in these kind of challenging complex spaces.
Yeah.
And like we were chatting about it Barry on the phone as well, like from a departmental perspective, would it be interesting also to embed the artists or creative practice in like the departmental space as well? And what would that look like in like from the cultural institution space? It's like the artists are certainly there, but are they embedded from the background rather than the foreground as well? Like, what do you think? How could that play out? Like, how would you imagine any of that playing out? Is it possible? How do we make it possible?
One of our team here is an expert advisory team for the nature restoration, and I was actually asking, say, science, fisheries.
Yeah.
So is there someone there around culture or art? It's not.
But that's
And it seems like a really optic. How could you try and develop the nature restoration now without addressing the cultural piece? But there's no experts there, so
seems like
I reckon put someone forward.
We're room for you.
Exactly.
We turn this into an interview session. But I think like from like that kind of department or cultural institution perspective, and definitely community development perspective, it's definitely been trials in the community development space, but then how can we expand on that, like and exactly what Ray's talking about? Bring it into those conversations.
I don't know if I have the answer, but I agree with what you're saying. I think the crisis we're in has been created in culture, how we behave as human beings, and our way out of it is through culture as well. And every year we do Earth Rising, and this year will be our 4th year. And as you'd imagine, every year we do a review, and we kind of go right what worked and what didn't work. And we really did a big stop and think this year on our open call process, and we were bringing hundreds of artists on site, and they were doing incredible work and showing incredible work. But we just felt like that the crisis had moved on, and that we needed to reflect that in how we set up and kind of, organise the open call. So we changed the parameters of it this year, and we kind of described it like a 3-legged stool, that we were looking for artistic practice that was connected with ecology and connected with community. And we were looking for projects that connected those 3 things together, because we see that as the way forward. I don't think it's enough anymore for an artist to be working in isolation of those 2 other things if you're working in this space. So we were quite insistent that the open call projects this year had those 3 elements. And it was, when we read through Siobhan is here in the audience, and she's part of the Earth Rising team as well and helps us with the open call. We read through all the applications of the Dinnseanchas project, kind of jumped out at us because it very clearly had very strong footholds in those 3 areas. And you can see the power of that then in the work that's been on show here this weekend. There's huge depth to it. It's really authentic. It's not, I've heard a number of times this weekend how it wasn't coming in with the solutions. It was going in with an open mind and listening and kind of working on the solutions together. That's the way forward, I think, and I think you guys are modelling that kind of behaviour, and the more we can celebrate that and showcase that and show that as a brilliant example for others to copy and emanate, I think that's really exciting.
I think we have to give a shout out to Ray and the lads for that as well, though, because they allowed that to happen. Because a lot of times when you do your commission to do projects, like, that's not necessarily facilitated, let's say.
Yeah.
You're kind of constrained in other ways, and I think that Ray and the lads really understood the value and the need for that relationship building, because like, I think there's
You
pro
you were
relationships.
unconstrainable.
Yeah.
You did try.
And the funding agent in this case was Creative Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's great bravery on their part to say, okay, we'll trust that the process has integrity. There was a lot of trust there. And I think I was, as observer on the project, and having worked with a funding agency in the past and seeing how the constraints can damage things, I was very impressed by the Creative Ireland trust, and I think that they've delivered something very special.
And that's true too, because with the art, this is something that we've seen a lot, where you don't know how the project is going to take shape. So me and the steering group had an idea of how it might go, and then we brought in the artists, and I'm like, okay, possibly. Then we brought in 10 community members as well. And then whatever their passions are, or the direction, like how we did a learning journey, however that information spoke to them, they wanted to go out and change, which totally changed the outputs and outcomes. And Creative Ireland would be really good about just being like, if it's making it meaningful, like change the budget or change this little bit, or just follow the energy rather than trying to decide something and then just put it out and be like, it's perfect. That will just be the way it works out. I think, staying in the trouble has to be flexible and evolving to get it.
Definitely.
Going back to your point earlier, Heather, as well, about being a bridge, for us on our bureaucratic regulatory side, it's the first time that you have something that's coming from the community telling the story, rather than usually we'd be dealing with maybe lobby groups, farming organisations. They're representing their people, their cohort, but this is wider community and it's telling a story. It's going back into time, and it's also projecting forward into the future as well. So it's helping the rules makers, I suppose, and policy makers to realise where a landscape or where a community is coming from as well, and where they want to go. So that's all very relevant. It's all very important. So that's certainly one part as to how it feeds into departments as well. So and it just opens up a way of imagining, a way of thinking as well. Beyond the facts and the figures as we relate to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think even around even honesty or something.
I'll take it.
Cool.
Yeah, come on, poor dust.
No, it's hardcore. But I think even being allowed to ease into the project was really important for that as well, and building the trust and being able to just sit and listen, actually. Just sit and
absolutely,
listen to people.
Yeah, totally.
Just be like, what's going on? Like,
That's-
a lot of times you're just getting returned.
Yeah, that's all part of it, isn't it? Because a lot of times people come and they talk to local people, they don't listen to them. And it's one thing I love in the job that I have is we have this thing called the National Parks and Wildlife Service Farm Plan Scheme, and I'm not as involved as I would have been once upon a time, but I just love getting out, meeting the farmers, and and the landowners. They're not just farmers, but when they see the inspector coming from the service or from the national parks, it's like, what do you want to see? They expect that you'd have a clipboard and you have to tick all these boxes and you pass a test, and I just want to chat.
There for the chats.
Yeah, and it just gets so much from it, and they open up and you get to learn so much, the background, the life story, the field names, the history, their own family history, what was there before, what their vision is, meeting the next generation, just love that, so it's exactly what you've done, you just take it in, like osmosis,
The place is a rich with all this fabulous, amazing lore. And we think our job is just to be like a funnel or something.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And I don't know much about art, but I suppose it's just a way of reflecting the world around us and trying to interpret and trying to communicate. And when you're sitting and listening and observing, you're taking it in, then you're as artists, like you're translating it into something that others can understand more widely. Like, so it's brilliant. Yeah, really relevant.
Also bringing in those new voices. A lot of people don't feel comfortable in certain spaces,
Exactly,
particularly around policy or even like old art institutions sometimes and different educational places. So by going out and just listening and building that relationship and making a piece of art that people are sharing and see themselves in, and then you can bring it to different places.
Exactly.
People just feel much more comfortable with being a part of the wider conversation.
Yeah, totally. So.
Invited to be credible as well.
Yeah, from an institution perspective as well, it's coming from, like you say, some art institutions can be like inaccessible or something for some degree. Like, I really feel you guys are trying to absolutely shift that compass.
Yeah, and look, all credit to Annie Fletcher, the director of IMMA. She's come in and she's set a really clear ambition, and we're too radically public, we're publicly funded, taxpayers pay for IMMA to exist, and every taxpayer should feel that they have a place there and that they're welcome there. And I think that's really important, and that's really, as somebody who works there, that's really purposeful and empowering. And everything we do at IMMA and at Art Rising is all free. There's no charge anywhere, and we're very privileged that we are in a position that we can do that. Again, because we don't want the cost of something to be a barrier to access. And our job is to create a space where every citizen feels like they can step over that threshold into a gallery. And I kind of describe Earth Rising in a way as kind of like a gateway drug to climate change. Like, so you come in and through something gentle like a film or a talk or a piece of art or a workshop, you come in and you get a taste for it, and then you might actually step into the gallery while you're there. Because there is an actual psychological thing called the threshold.
Absolutely,
where people are afraid to step into a gallery because they're not always the most welcoming of places. They can be kind of quiet and a little bit intimidating. And if you haven't studied art, sometimes you feel like you're not entitled to be there, which is absolutely not true. But you can understand why people would feel that way. So anything we can do to try and break that down.
Well, I think it's a good point that notion of like someone's like, I don't know anything about art or whatever. You say Barry, like you absolutely do. Anything we said your feedback is always so on point, and it's like, it's really good, yeah. So we kind of miss that bit in the place, or we like just that little layer.
So I'm an art critic now, like.
You're a top critic, actually. But it is that thing. It's like, no, everyone does, because if it's touching any sort of emotive string, then the dialogue's happening, and that's the success. So that if it's not speaking to you, fair enough. Everybody doesn't speak to everybody. It's not universal. But does anybody have any burning questions from the audience?
I'm wondering about maybe from a pure artist point of view, there's that saying, a camel is a horse decided on by a committee, that when everybody is listening to and everybody has their say, that, in some ways an artist's job is a pure vision, and they kind of drag us into the future. They've seen a vision of the future, not a mediated vision of the future, just that's what they're amazing at. And have you come across it when you're kind of listening to everybody and everything, how do you synthesize that into a pure vision that can bring us forward? That makes sense.
I don't think there's any pure visions. There's a lot of different visions, but it's like also, I think that thing is shifting from the artist being the visionary. I think we are just a channel. We need to be a channel for all the visions that are occurring. Like, what are those visions in Kerry? What are the visions in Ardnaculla? And what are the visions up in Gaul? Because they're all different as well, and everybody's hopes and aspirations are quite different, and their lived experience is quite different as well. So all of that informs that kind of future vision. I think we're just translators of that.
Very good. Yeah, it's kind of that facilitation by having all of them, and then you choose maybe the order that they go in. So
there's a narrative formation.
Yeah, so it might be two very different points of view, but by having them together, and that's kind of your role to be like, these are really interesting there, and then that kind of changes the whole perspective. So it's more, like choreography rather than having a pure vision. That's all.
I think we're moving away from the time when we're moving away from the time when the artist is this sort of in the tower and with this special vision. And there are some amazing artists who've contributed to Western society and other societies through that way. But the artists that were engaged here are very much using a skill set within a context, not as a special person, well, everybody's special kind of thing, or nobody's special. They're just one of a collective. They happen to have a particular skill set. And, places like IMMA and here are the vehicles through which that is shared. But it's artists working in a different way.
A question, and not to put you on the spot, so only if it comes to mind, was there a particular moment or aspect from the recent projects you were involved in that was felt really meaningful or powerful, and then projects that you both have come across, creative projects involved in sustainability that comes to mind as a powerful example?
That's me first. You're the artist on the panel. Supposedly.
Sorry
about that in advance.
I did think deep. I guess one of the ones that kind of came to me when I went out to do the sound walk, it was the very last thing that I did, and I went to the farm that I probably had the most different point of view with her. So I kind of went out to her first to chat through and see what we want to do, and she's the only one that actually lets me help on the farm, I think because she's a female farmer. So everyone else is like, yeah, feed the lamb, and I'm like, is that helping or is that for me? Gets me moving water up and was teaching me how to try to qualify. And then I went in and she'd named a little lamb that her mom was keeping after me. And at that moment I was like, oh, this is just a friendship. We're just hanging out now. It's not like me researching or making art about you. And literally teaching me a quad bike up and down the field, being like, it's so weird. Do you want to be a farmer? So I think even though we come from completely different worlds and don't even speak the same language, she'd be very much a way forward. But it's just, now we've hung out so many days that it feels, That's you on the spot.
Same. But no, it is true though that I do echo that, but it's the same with Tim. We're just pals now. That's the way it is.
I think it's the best part of the project that all the artists are on hugging terms with 8-year-old sheep farmers. Literally. We went down and
That's very true. But I think, and then there was I think there was one moment we've already heard it, but when we were out with Tim and Pat and Paddy, and they were working to protect the last breeding pair of curly in North Kerry, and they spend days upon days, years doing this. But when the curly does nest, and they were trying to nest, they build a protection perimeter, mainly from land predators, but it's quite impossible to protect from predators from the air. But they were going up inspecting the nest, and we were hiding out lower down below, because we definitely get in the way. It's just but we got, and they were really just really excited because the curly had laid. This is massive. Went up then to inspect the nest, and they just kind of came down the hill, and it was the shape, the body shape had changed. Their heads were down. It was came closer, and the nest had been dated, and the eggs were gone. And it was just they were just devastated for drive back down the mountain, and it was just heartbreaking. They were heartbroken. It's just we were just Jesus, the care here was just you can't even, my words can't articulate the level of emotion and care just that day, and how just bitterly disappointed they were. And thankfully the curly laid again that year, which is very unusual. They released 3 chicks that year.
I didn't know second half of
He's carrying the devastation. But but that was there was a phenomenal shift, and I was okay, how does the rest of the world see or understand this level of care and detail, and just love going into this place. I showed these three burning men like here, you know, they're in their 70s and yeah, that was pretty fundamental.
It's funny, I've had a bit of a full circle moment this weekend because this time 3 years ago, and Siobhan's heard this story before, so I was kind of at a crossroads and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life anymore, and I was down at the Galway Arts Festival and I just happened upon an art installation by John George and Blair installation, and it really, really affected me. And that was the moment where I decided where I wanted to go. And here I am now 3 years later, talking on behalf of IMMA on sustainability, organising the Earth Rising Festival and meeting John George for the first time. So it's been a really kind of special moment for me. So that's my 360 story. Yeah. Go on, old you.
One penny banana. I think I said to her on that stage just then last year, I was like, ultimately a fun connection, don't you? She was like, absolutely. It's a fun connection.
Very excited.
In terms of moments with art, is it?
What was effect or yeah.
I suppose in a related way, being from Kerry, we do think of football as an art. And,
Stay away from the century.
it's kind of going back to the approach you took on different approaches, but ultimately it was about fitting into the community. And again, like we could be, but again, just using the hurley as an example, things we're talking about, we could be like, yeah, we gotta save the curlew, like, you know, come on in, and like it's coming from top down. But we said that what are people interested in here locally, like, and to socialise this whole idea. So we organised a thing called the Curlew Cup, and it was a football competition between all the schools in the stronghold of the Curlew in Kerry. So schools got to play against each other for the Curlew Cup. And it was just to celebrate, like, you know, this is an important area, like, we should be proud of. Because when I was growing up, like, we always thought of our land as, like, you know, something that we'd always be ashamed of. Because it was kind of boggy, marginal, rushy land, like, you know, and it wasn't productive and cool and green and fast moving like the rest of it. But what struck me, it stayed with me, actually, it was a young lad that was, this is primary school, it's like the young lad that was the captain of the winning team, and he got the cup in a and totally unprompted, like somebody said, just say a few words or whatever. And he started talking about hurley, like, and how it's like so nice to know that his area was one of the most important areas in Ireland, like, you know, and he felt proud of his area. That's good. So that's kind of like, you know, just all relating like back into it, like, you know, it's, yeah, socialise the whole thing about, like, Jesus, Heather, you totally got it there about the lads and it's fairly attritional as a lot of us that are working in nature conservation law. Like, it can be emotionally difficult, like, when you care so deeply and you see what's happening in the natural world. And I think art again has a positive part to play there, whether it's reading a story, or whether it's reading a poem, or whether it's seeing a painting or something like that. It just gives you heart, like, and if there's artists out there that are reflecting that, I think it's kind of an unspoken thing, really, like those who are working in nature conservation, just the emotional side, like, you know, art can play a positive part there in telling that story, but also in comforting those people that are involved, you know, so well done, actually.
It is like a follow, but we are going to wrap up though in like 6 minutes because you start trying to catch. Alright. No, it's great, it's fine. But I think just kind of wrap up in a way of like ending on something like that we're talking about anyway, with like the role of art, role of creative practices being embedded, and then like the different like areas that everyone's working in, but it's also the different disciplines everyone's working in, and is it like is kind of the next step beyond awareness and beyond all of those things, this kind of transdisciplinary, like interdisciplinary way of working where all of our silos are starting to cross a lot more kind of intentionally as well. You know, it's not like I'm just going to document what you're doing over there and then share. It's like more like how are we all actually really working together to shift the narrative, I guess, and then like gently but also a little bit of force push the kind of collective action mode, against collective action mode, I guess, which is like what you guys are obviously trying to do here as well and deal with these weekends and stuff. But like, what would your kind of vision for that look like in like one short sentence?
As in actually bringing together.
Yeah, or like how those disciplinary silos are kind of just broken down, and then it's like it goes beyond just a project. It's kind of, it moves beyond a project and actually becomes practice.
Yeah.
Like interdisciplinary practice, if that makes sense.
I guess one thing is definitely time, because I started out with research, and I guess for communities, time is measured in like 50 years, 60 years.
Yeah.
Like, whereas you come in on these projects and it's 1 or 2 years. I just keep changing job title, like from researcher to now artist. There was designer in there as well. And so yeah, it's just to keep the momentum going or keep working on whatever you're interested in. And it doesn't really matter what you're called, as long as you stick with it.
Yeah, and keep putting the threads in.
Yeah.
Continue those relationships
And whatever
relationality.
plans or whatever it is that you need to do to get there.
Yeah.
I think one word that keeps coming to my head is community, and you know we've themed this year's festival Making Kin, which is a riff off one of the big themes in Donna Haraway's book. But as somebody who works for a space, and even like Home Tree have a space, I think creating spaces for people from different backgrounds to come together is so important. I haven't read a huge amount into it, but there's this new project called the 89% Project. Some of you might have read about it. But it's research that's been done that shows that 89% of the population in the Western world is in support of, believes in climate change and is supportive of change. But we all feel like we're on our own and that the majority don't feel the same way that we feel. And actually by coming to spaces like this, you start to realise there's more than just me that feels this way, and you start to build a community and connections. I think the more of that is brilliant. The more we can do of that, that's what we need. So kudos to Home Tree for creating this space, and we'll be hopefully doing something similar up in September at our Horizon as well. To just provide a space for people to come together. And when people come together, that's when the magic happens. And we're just facilitating it. Yeah.
I think it's kind of been alluded to in terms of a higher level in IMMA, like the leadership and the vision and the trust, and I think that goes across the board in whatever organisation. Like the senior people, like if they encourage and facilitate and allow space and time for people to engage, and so again, as civil servants of the world, like just informed that this is your job, this is what you do, etc. But I think we need to be more expansive in our thinking and to engage with more with artists as well, rather than just solely just the scientists from our side. It's scientists that we're dealing with, or it's farming organisations or whatever it might be. And even I often say about science as well, like it's not science that's going to save these species. If it is, it's going to be social science. So we need to have more social sciences. We need to have more artists. We need to just have a more expansive view of the world, because in any case, for those of us who are ecologists, it's not, it wasn't reports, it wasn't scientific peer reviewed papers, I was into nature.
Yeah.
It's observing the world around us and the beauty of it, and again, art is such an important part to play there, and maybe reawaken some of that, the child in a lot of us, wearing suits the rest of the group,
Can I make a tiny offer? Just Dublin City Council at the moment has artists embedded in the council, which has been a really interesting, nothing that Kerry County Council couldn't do. Couldn't follow their lead with. So there's a model that's already playing out and over at the moment, so I want to follow up with.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Cork County Council.
Thanks for that. That's a good tip. Really good tip. I guess. Clare County Council, look into Limerick County Council, Kerry County Council. All the others. But we're going to wrap it up with we're still trying to catch it. But thank you so much for your time. Last thing on a Sunday evening. Thank you after doing a walk and a talk and after doing a walk and after being a brilliant participant all weekend. Thank you so much. So Lisa, Barry, and thank you.